From the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's The Just Bernard Show, streaming on multiple platforms. I just noticed my face looks dark. Give me a second while I put a little bit of light on the situation here. That's a little bit better. Anyway, so welcome. Yes, I usually do the lighting beforehand, but now it's in my eye. Forget that. So, I'm so glad to be here. It's been, a couple of weeks. Last week, I don't know about y'all, but during the spring, maybe if I change this, during the spring, here in Roanoke, it's like really cool, like at night, like in the 60s, sometimes in the 50s. And then in the afternoon, it'll go up to like 80. Yesterday, I think I went up to 90, 89 or 90. Anyway, I call this migraine season, and yes, unfortunately, I did have a migraine headache last Tuesday, and I tried to shake it off. So at the last minute, about half hour before the show, I realized it wasn't going to stop. So I had to postpone today's show. This is a really good topic, and I wanted to make sure that I was nice and clear-headed and well-rested and feeling good. So we are going to be talking today about shamanism and schizophrenia. And I know many of you might be going, what does one have to do with the other? But they most certainly do. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. I'll tell you a little bit about... Today we're going to talk a little bit, about what inspired me to do today's talk and use this particular topic for a show, as well as some of the research that I had done over the years on this particular topic. And we're going to cover a little bit about what each of them are, what do they have to do with each other, and quite honestly, how sometimes one can be misdiagnosed for the other and vice versa. And as someone who went through all of the above back in my teens and 20s, I am talking from experience. And let me just say that, and I'll do this disclaimer at the very beginning, while I may have been a psychology major for many years, I am not a doctor, I am not a psychiatrist, and I am a philosopher. I am a philosopher and a Reiki master, but I am not a psychologist or a psychologist, so let's get that out of the way. This is strictly going to be observational, having to do with my personal experiences, as well as decades of research that I've done on the topic. But so let me say hello to a few of you that have already joined us in the chat room. And well, I see so many regular faces. Good to see y'all. Hi, Shelly. Hi, Susan. Hi, Julie. Hi, Marianne. Hi, James, all on Facebook. Hello, Fatboy Sim on YouTube. Anyway, so before we jump into the topic, I just want to let you know about next week's show. I know I always say that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Well, next week I am going to do it. I want to do a hangout chat with you all. Normally we have a formal show and I'm teaching something or I have a guest on. And way back in the day, probably about a year ago, I said I'm going to do monthly live chats and just hang out and chat with you all. So next week will just be a nice hangout. Actually, I thought it'd be fun to go through some of the comments on the videos and answer questions that have been posted there, and just kind of look at, you know, how the community's doing. How are you all doing? So next week we will be doing that. It'll be a community get together. So without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about what inspired me to do this topic and do this show. So a couple of weeks ago, I had some friends over, and I think it was like our first like post mask wearing not event. I literally just had 3 friends over, and one of them had mentioned something about how they're ashamed of their mental illness, or and they never even said what it was, but they were saying something about how they're embarrassed to talk about it. And I was like, well, isn't it like Mental Health Awareness Month? And I was like, listen, you can't be ashamed of a medical / psychiatric diagnosis. There's no way to live. You have to embrace it, wave your freak flag. And I asked everyone in the room, I was like, how many of us have been to rehab or have been to a psychiatric facility? And every one of us raised our hand. Every single person in the room had been either to rehab or to a psychiatric facility. My first experience with rehab was when I was 15 years old. My parents found weed in my room, and I was an addict, But and I have a feeling there were ulterior motives, but I won't get into that too much. Maybe one of these days I'll get into that long story. I think they were trying to pray the gay away, if you know what I mean. But anyway, long story short, that was my first stint in rehab. A year later, they put me back in. Probably through my 20s, I would say every 2 years, I was at a facility to either quit drinking or quit smoking weed. It was also the 80s, so there was cocaine involved. So I had been to several facilities throughout my teens and my 20s. Depression that comes along with all of that. And when I started getting involved in spirituality, now mind you, my paranormal experiences, shamanic experiences, we'll use the term shamanic experiences for today's show, such as seeing departed family members appear before me, having prophetic visions, having prophetic dreams. All of these things that I've spoken about in the past started when I was a kid. I was a little kid when this stuff started. So I thought it was kind of normal. But as I went into, adolescence and whatnot, I began trying to suppress those experiences and not talk about them because people thought I was crazy talking about, oh, my grandmother's floating over your head right now, the one who passed away. So lo and behold, they put me on anti-anxiety meds. About 13 years old, I had my first prescription to Xanax. And so this whole, you go through the normal rigmarole of, the normals, the normies, for lack of a better term, or people that want to adhere to what are considered social norms, trying to suppress spiritual gifts within their children. We see it a lot going with what we used to call the indigo children, how indigos could remember past lives, how, they were very much very attuned and connected to the spiritual world on a frequency. And because of that, a lot of them get including myself, we tend to try to suppress it and get misdiagnosed with all different types of everything from bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, borderline personality. I can go on and on and on, and the list goes on and on. And so when I got involved in shamanism and I was preparing for my first shamanic vision quest, yes, utilizing a very powerful medicine, the person who was working with me, the shamanic practitioner who was working with me, said, I want you to research what is the difference between shamanism and schizophrenia. And I found it fascinating because I was like, what is the difference? Why is this even under the same umbrella? Here I was 23 years old, 24 years old, and wondering what this one had to do with the other. And back then we didn't really have the internet, and at least I didn't have it. So here I am at the local Clearwater Library, downtown Clearwater Library, and I was very surprised they actually had books on it. And I remember sitting there by the big bay window overlooking the big lawn by the library, and just sucking in all the information in this book and taking it over the printer. Back then, you couldn't save it to your phone. I literally had to copy pages on the printer and make photocopies of the pages that stuck out to me. And I had to write a research paper, basically. That was like my first assignment. It's like, if you're going to do this powerful medicine and you're going to have a shamanic experience, you need to know what's shamanic and what is a psychological imbalance, for lack of a better term. And I just found it completely fascinating. That's when I realized a lot of what had been going on with me, in reference to, the anxiety, which I still have. I think we all have anxiety to an extent. But with the depression, the drug abuse, and all of these other things, either trying to feel comfortable with the gifts or trying to suppress the gifts that were happening and I was living with. Now, throughout all of this, and I don't know, and I should have researched this when I was researching today's show. For me, throughout all of this, is that I was always an honor student. I had a GPA of like 3.8 for most of the time. I was always in honor roll and honor society and, senior class president, even though I was in a tiny private school. But I was always a very good student, but yet I was always very anxious, very depressed, and always, utilizing some kind of mind-altering substance, especially in high school. But anyway, so I wonder about that. I wonder how many of those who are going through shamanic awakening are going through the same thing. So I want to go into and talk a little bit about what are the differences. Let's start off with the definitions. So I'm going to start with the quote by Joseph Campbell, who is the perfect guy to go to talk about this stuff. And he says, Joseph Campbell states that the schizophrenic is drowning in the same waters in which the mystic swims with delight. I'll say that again. The schizophrenic is drowning in the same waters in which the mystic swims with delight. Interesting. And it goes, I'm going to comment on my comments, on my comments, on my comments. It reminds me of me not knowing there was anything wrong with me. It was like, I was fine visiting and talking with the spirits and performing manifestation as a child and an adolescent until someone told me, you're crazy, My devout Catholic and Pentecostal family thought I was crazy. But anyway, the schizophrenic is a serious mental disorder. First of all, let's make that very, very clear. Schizophrenia is nothing to laugh at. I'm going to read to you the definition from the Mayo Clinic, where they state, it is a mental disorder in which people interpret reality abnormally. Schizophrenia may result in some combination of hallucinations, delusions, and extremely disordered thinking and behavior that impairs daily function and can be disabling. A long time, when I did this paper, and I forgot who did it to me, my original one when I was 24 years old, half of my life ago, someone said to me, a great way to synopsize this concept is that the schizophrenic is dreaming while they're awake. that they're living in the dream world while they're awake, and they don't have the ability to differentiate, the be here now aspect from the dream world. Boy, I can go on and on about this topic. Let's see if I can keep it down to a half hour. So with that definition we just heard from the Mayo Clinic, you can see where the young shaman, or the shaman that is emerging, the young person, is probably going through very similar symptoms. So let's talk about shamans. Shamans work within the spirit realm and spirit guides, travel out of body, utilize ecstatic trance and visions, intuitive, sensitive, mercurial, and have an eccentric personality. Ding, 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 ding. Every box checked. The one who is chosen, normally, traditionally, within an indigenous culture, the one who is chosen is usually an adolescent, and they will resist this calling, sometimes for years. This is where a lot of, I can relate to a lot of what's being said here. Tortured by the spirits appearing in the form of physical or mental illness, breaks the resistance of the shaman until it eventually breaks the resistance of the shamanic candidate, and he or she has to accept the vocation. So, and again, this is a very dear topic to my heart. Those of you who remember when I first started on YouTube, it was after a life upheaval. It was after the spirits literally destroyed every normal aspect of my life. I lost my home, I lost my job, I lost my career. I literally had to start from scratch, and the spirit guide said, you have to focus on your vocation. Now you must focus on your vocation. So here I was, 38 years old, something like that, and it's like, fine, I'll do it. Fine, I'll do it. I'll start over again as a shaman, as a mystic, as a pagan high priest, etc., healer, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Now, to get there was ruthless. It was absolutely horrible, and there's something that I've got to say in all of this, because I hope that my experience will help those that might be going through something similar. And that is that as a young person, I was so enamored by the spirit realm that I forgot how important the physical realm is. I don't want to say it was escapism, even though I'm sure a lot of it was, or at least some of the drug abuse as a young person was for escapism. But it was almost as if I resented being in physical form, that I resented living in this daily waking consciousness that we all must be a part of. And I know I've said this before, I probably say it every week, and this is probably what saved my mental health, was that that advice that my shamanic teacher told me, how a shaman alters the state of consciousness at will and keeps one foot firmly planted on every plane of consciousnness, including the physical, including the emotional, including the astral and the spiritual. We must remain grounded in this realm, this vibratory world that we are incarnated in. We must pay the bills. We must have a roof over our head. We must feed ourselves. We must care for ourselves and be able to blend in with the normies. And I say that as a joke, because all my normie friends know how eccentric I am and know exactly what I do, and that's the other thing. When I was 15, 16, I think I was 16 years old, I was outed as a gay man. One of my friends outed me, and actually my father That's a whole nother thing. My father had a detective following me, so I was outed by a detective and a high school friend. And that process of coming out of that particular closet was scary. But it wasn't as scary as coming out of the mystical closet. Coming out as a practitioner of the mystical arts, the shamanic arts, the magical arts, the occult arts, whatever you want to call it, was probably scarier than anything, because within this society, especially for me, it was in the 90s that I started opening up the broom closet. I call it the broom closet. Coming out of the broom closet, we were met with, satanic panic. We were met with, you're crazy, you're mentally ill, you're not speaking to spirits, you're having hallucinations. And, oh yeah, well, you did a hallucinogenic, that's why you spoke to spirit guides. I'm like, well, they're still talking to me. 40 years later, 30 years later, they're still talking to me. But, so it was very difficult. And I find that by embracing the vocation, for me, it was the embracing of the vocation and knowing that this was the reason why I'm on the planet, that I am here to heal, that I am here to commune with the spirits, that I am here to transcend. I actually had a joke this morning, and I'll tell you in a second, but to transcend this realm of consciousness. This morning, I had a little joke. I'll share it with you now, because I'm thinking about today's show this morning, and I was like, you know what? I'm coming out as trans. I am trans-dimensional. I am transcendent of this particular realm of consciousness. I do not identify with this 3.5 dimension illusory world. Call it trans-Maya, trans-dimensional, whatever. It's more. There's so much more than what we see. There's so much more than what we are experiencing on this plane of consciousness. There is more than our job. There is more than the story. We'll get into that another day. The story of who we think we are, who we've been told to believe who we are. That when we start going through these experiences, what do? We run to the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist has no idea what is going on with you, so they're going to put you in a box and label you something. Now, with that being said, let's move it over to the other spectrum. So, I've been talking about it from the viewpoint as an emerging shaman, perhaps experiencing mental illness or whatnot, or thinking that it's a mental illness when in fact it's spiritual emergence. Oh, that was the name of the paper, Spiritual Emergence versus Schizophrenia. Anyway, so we're looking at it from that aspect, but now let's turn it around. Let's look at it from the other aspect. There are, in many cases, and I've had to work with some people like this, who are truly schizophrenic, who are truly mentally ill and feel, having delusions that they are shamanic, having delusions that they are, trans-dimensional. I'm going to use that more often now. So it's important to be able to tell the difference, but the subtle differences are so hard to identify that I've worked with, at this point in my career, thousands of people on these types of issues and these types of topics, mystical, etc. And I still can't pinpoint, what that line is. What is the line from spiritual emergence to an actual, whether it be an organic or psychological mental illness? And sometimes it's all the above. Sometimes it is spiritual emergence with some mental illness and some organic brain disorder. Sometimes, it's hard to tell. But I will say that eventually, over time, whether it's the person with mental illness or the schizophrenic, we have to choose to put our foot on every plane of consciousness. We have to choose to ground. Grounding is so important. So important. I'm going to say that again. Doing your daily grounding exercises is vital to maintain balance, to maintain a psychological balance, to maintain a spiritual balance. And I don't know if she's watching today. I have a dear friend who's been watching the show now for a while, and she did a healing on me about, I would say it was 2001. Okay, she did a chakra balance on me, and I think it might have been the very first time I had a chakra balance done. Geez, almost 20 years ago now. And after she was done, she said to me, now mind you, I was 25, 26, something like that, 27 at the time when she did this, and she's like, man, your lower chakras were locked up, but your higher ones were spinning and they were expanded and blah blah blah. She's like, your consciousness is floating like 3 feet above your body. And I was like, what? She's like, you need to come back down to earth. She's like, it's like your head is like a balloon floating 3 feet above your head. And I was like, oh my Lord. And at this time I was doing a lot of drugs back then anyway. But, and I think that's why I was doing it. I could not reel that consciousness back down to earth. I didn't want to do the grounding exercises. I was so enamored with traversing the spiritual planes and just focusing on, the out-of-body experiences and the visions I was receiving and the contact with my guides and all of that my lower chakras were completely locked. I wasn't on the earth. I was above the earth constantly. That will lead to psychological, mental, and spiritual imbalance. So, again, grounding exercise every day is vital. There is a difference between shamanism, spiritual emergence, and schizophrenic and or mental imbalance or illness. That's not to say you can't have one with the other. However, there is a difference. They may overlap. One may be a symptom of the other. But as we explore more of who we are from the inside, the more that we explore this world that we live in, the more we train our minds to be here, now, in the moment, grounded, feet firmly on the ground, consciousness connected to source, God, goddess, chi, prana, whatever, universe, whatever word you like. That's where we find the difference. When we do meditations together, you'll notice I always start with us grounding our roots into the earth, and then connecting universe consciousness. Allow the universe consciousness to flow down into our heads while our roots go down into the core of the earth, wrap around the core of the earth, and we remain grounded. So our balloon doesn't fly away, our consciousness doesn't fly away. When I was growing up, I grew up, the family that adopted me as a newborn is Cuban. And so I grew up in a very Cuban Miami family. And within that, you can imagine there was a lot of Santeria involved, brujeria and all that stuff going on. And, or at least I saw it. I heard about it. I heard stories about either family members or family friends or whatnot. And most of the time, the stories I would hear was how they went crazy. of how they ended up either having psychological issues, or I remember my mom saying, "Oh no, never do the Ouija board. I knew a lady and she started having visions and went nuts," and I'm like, well, now looking back, I'm like, because she didn't ground. She didn't ground her energy. Anyway, I definitely got it. I need to start wrapping this up, but I want to say that we have anxiety. The world is freaking nuts. Maybe the world is going through shamanic emergence. I don't know. Maybe we're getting ready to transcend. I do know that. We are transcending to a new plane of consciousness, but in that transcending, this whole giant planet with billions of people on it, things are getting a little nuts. And the more and more of us who do not identify with the social construct of oppression that has been thrust upon us, the more we're going to have anxiety, whether it be social anxiety, whether it be money anxiety, whether it be depression because of money and social anxiety, whatever it is. So many people are having issues now. And to those of you who are under a therapist's care or a doctor's care, or are taking antidepressants, or taking medicine for schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, whatever it may be, don't be ashamed of it. Don't be ashamed of it. The idea that we need to be ashamed of who we are is the illness. The idea that we should be ashamed of being depressed, being anxious, having an organic brain imbalance, which is what bipolar disorder is. It's a lack of salts in the brain. That's a medical thing, and they're all medical as far as I'm concerned. So don't ever feel embarrassed to talk about mental illness. And for the people that don't like or make fun of you for having mental illness, 9 times out of 10 they probably have it themselves. Going back to my earlier discussion at the very beginning, I'm pointing behind me because that's where everybody was sitting. When I asked everybody in the room, had anyone been to rehab or a psychiatric facility, everyone in the room raised their hand. Now, either I'm attracting a bunch of crazy people because I'm crazy, probably, or the reality of it is that everyone has some form of quote unquote labeled mental illness. So let it go. The idea of caring, we should never care. Harm none, do what you will. Harm none, do what you will. Please ground yourself. Please do the breathing that I always teach. Just do a few breaths. Quiet your mind. Feel the earth beneath you. And know when to be honest with yourself. Know that sometimes you do need to reach out for help, and that's fine. And yes, I do spiritual counseling, but I am not a psychologist. But if you are going through shamanic emergence and you need some pointers, feel free to book a session with me. Seriously, I work with a lot of people on this stuff. We call it awakening coaching. Well, I don't, but the normies do. Anyway, guys, I am so looking forward to next week. Like I said, we're just going to chat. Let me say hi to a few more of you that popped in. I just saw there's some great conversations going on. I'm watching. And hello, Bob on Facebook. Hi, Huge Spinner and Gary Wardell on YouTube. Good to see you, Gary. Kiki's on YouTube. Hello there. Hi, Lessa and William on Facebook. So glad you all are here, and I hope you got some inspiration, or I hope you got a little something today. Maybe gave you some food for thought. Anyway, like I said, next week we're just going to hang out. We're going to do some live chatting. I'm going to answer your questions. You can leave your questions on any comment, because I'm going to be scanning all the comments throughout all my platforms. We're going to go through some of the comments. Some of them are going to be funny, I'm sure. Some people just, like to be a smart butt, but we'll read those comments too. And again, please, by all means, if you want to learn more about my experience with my shamanic vision quest that I went through in 1992, please feel free to find my book, The Book of One, Returning to Source Wisdom. It's a story of how I prepared for it, what I went through, what they taught me. There's some really timeless wisdom and information that the emissaries of light gave to me, and they're very much still a part of my life. And sometimes I think they're the ones that do the show, because sometimes I don't prepare at all. But anyway, you can check it out on Amazon, or you can go to bernardalvarez.com to find the book as well. Don't forget, my course is up, the Awakening Code. It will help ground you. It will help clear your mind and clear all the cobwebs out, if that's what you're interested in. But check that out. I love you guys. I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.